So our next speaker is Brad Parry. He's with the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation.
Thank you. My name is Brad Parry. I currently serve as the vice chair for the Northwestern Band of Shoshone Nation. I'm also employed as the natural resources officer. You may have heard, if you haven't, we're doing one of the largest ecological restoration projects in the entire Bear River watershed in just north of Preston, Idaho. If you don't know where Preston is, watch Napoleon Dynamite, you'll get it. You'll see some of the backdrop there. I'm just gonna briefly talk about the project, not too much, as I would normally, because one thing that we need to explain is why we're doing this. Why is this good? You know, what's this about? And so the Wuda just means Bear River. Back then, they would have said Bia Ogwa, or Big River. To make it a little bit more personal for us, we changed it. And so, you know, you can see that we lived in traditional lifeways, but, you know, the Bear River watershed, and just remember that shape, you know. I gotta remember I have two sides. Oh. Just a shot of the Bear River. This is the Northwestern Band of Shoshone Aboriginal territory, so you can kind of see we really did mostly live in the Bear River and the Weber River watersheds, but you know, that was really our area. That's why the Bear River watershed is so important to us. This is the map that it was based on. This is called the James Doughty map, and you can see the Northwestern Band here, and where it says Pocatello. He tried to like sign himself up, but he got run out, so we took over. He was a Northwestern though. So when I said, what are kind of the reasons why we want to do this? This is what's called the Warren Angus Ferris map. This is archived at BYU, and the scale is horrible on this. You can see, here's the Great Salt Lake, and I think right here they have Fort Hall, which is 150 miles from here. So there's a lot going on, but just to notice, this was in 1836. You can see how far the lake went west compared to where it sits today, and you can see all the trails of the people in the Bear River watershed. So what we're trying to do with our project is we are taking a channelized system and releasing it back into meanders like you see here. Water meanders over our ground, which we anticipate should give about 13,000 acre feet of water per year to the Great Salt Lake. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing it. Another reason why is we have to tell our history. Look, we have teepees and we have walking trails and things like here. What were we doing? Why should we have to remind people about what used to happen? It's like, well, because a lot of people don't know. They don't know how we survived on the Bear River. The Bear River was our life point, our watershed. It's the only reason that we could subsist. You can see, you know, other maps. This is the Bonneville map from 1837. You can see Shoshone Indians, SLCo. SLCo is a Shoshone term. It just means those that travel by horse. You know, Shoshone is those that travel by foot. So we're the same. You can see how spread out we are in the area in the 1830s. Just fur trappers were there, not a lot, you know, some miners coming through, but not really yet. And so we had the run of the mill of the place, you know, and we needed to survive, and we moved in large family groups at that time, whereas as encroachment or things became, you know, more populated, we separated into smaller and smaller bands. You can these are just maps of winter camps and trails and things that you can see a lot through the Bear River, right there, right, left. Skip that slide. Just watching my time. So along the Bear River, you don't think, oh, there was probably a herd of bison that was there that the Northwestern Band of Shoshone or the Shoshone people lived on. There was absolutely a lot of bison. That was one of our biggest things in walking the Bear River. You know, there are buffalo jumps in Logan. They're all over the place, and you know they would come down to drink, and the water, and sometimes we could get them around a watershed, a deep pool, and get them to drown, and that's how we ate them. And so, but Chief Segwich, who is one of my great-grandfathers, said in the middle of the 1820s, after a large snow, apparently they had a lot, we haven't seen that much snow before, but it killed off all the buffalo herd that was there. So that's one life source that got taken away. There was only 7 left from what they counted in the valley or in the watershed. And this is everything that we used it for. Food, tools, warmth, clothing, fly swatter even. You could cut the tongue out and comb your hair just because it's like a cat's tongue. I don't recommend it, but you could do it. And so it was used for a lot of things. And so that snow, amazingly took everything away. The other thing that was abundant in the area were beaver dams. If you have beaver dams, you have fish. If you have fish, you have birds. If you have birds, you have little animals on the ground that could be eaten. And so beaver dams really were a big part of the overall system. Thus, all the fur trappers decided to come and take those out. So those were the 2 main things. This is a slide from the University of Utah that I just straight up stole. And it talks about the Bear River watershed. And archaeological sites were plants, animals, but really, what did they see most of? Beaver and bison bones. And if you look at that, that is the entire Bear River watershed that we live. A lot of bison, a lot of beaver, ducks, deer, whatever you needed. And we want to remind people that it used to be like that. You could have bison here. We're too many people now, but you could. Like I said, the fur trappers came down, Peter Skeen Ogden. We were called Stake Indians, but some of those encounters that we had seen were with fur trappers, and they're recorded in their journals. And he understood, and town of Ogden's named after him, Hudson Bay Company. And again, you can see these are encounters with basically anyone who kept a journal and wrote about an encounter with the tribe. And that is the Bear River right there, exactly. And so we're camped along it. We absolutely needed to have that. There was also, you could see the bison observations in some of the areas right along the river. That food source was bountiful, as I've said. So you can see it's kind of the arc of the Bear River. This slide is from the University of Utah. I went there, so I figured I could steal it. I actually work with they actually did this for us, but you can see that what they tried to do is match up what Chief Segwich said in an article in the 1800s. And it does. It matches up. Buffalo were here, gone. So you can kind of see the good work that they're doing there. For graph nerds, we put this in there. Says the same thing as the last one. But yeah, the entire Bear River watershed. So I want to kind of shift. So we had the 2 major things. People start coming into the valley, and what are we supposed to do? You can kind of see just some of the subsistence areas: Shoshone Bannock, Fort Hall, Shoshone, all the little teepees and stuff like that. Now these maps were starting to be drawn by people like Julian Stewart, Howard Stansberry, who were great archaeologists that studied the area. And you can see how much less of encampments and their stuff are that they noticed, because they started to do it after contact, after people started to come in. Why did we camp along the Bear River? Why do we camp along water? One, you got to drink it. I didn't want to put a glass of water up there, I figured. But you had to have a drinking source. The other thing was the wetlands. If you have wetlands, you can eat ducks, you can eat deer, you can do whatever. But we needed these wetlands. And that's something that's going away in our areas. The wetlands are shrinking, and wetlands produce life. I mean, that's really how we look at that. One of the most important things in the wetlands is the willow, or the suhavi. We call this the life-giving plant or the woman's plant. This is our most sacred and special plant. You can use it to make shelter. You can use it for a cradle board. You can use it for medicine. You can eat it. You can tie cords with it. You can do whatever. It gives life. It gives life in that wetlands. And so water with the willows gives life. Our men would stand around. It was so special that the women would only go in there and pick them because the women give life. And the men would stand around. And I asked Rios, well, why'd they have to protect them standing around? He said, well, there used to be bears and tigers and all sorts of things back then. So I said, tigers? He goes, oh, yeah. And I said, all right. So that's really an important plant for us. The other one is the cattail. Think of a baby, and what'd you do for diapers? Well, they stuff. You can peel that off, stuff them in because it absorbs the wet. You could use it for pillow comforting. You can actually grind that up into grain or to a flour, and make something to eat. You can actually pull it out and eat it. Kind of tastes like celery. So the cattail was a major part, and that's what you get in wetlands, and that's why we traverse there. So traditionally, a lot of people, like I use this as an example. If you've seen Dances with Wolves, those are Plains Indians with teepees that have skins and canvas and stuff like that. When your name is the people who wander by foot, this is what your stuff is made of. So you had to camp near these things. This is all made up of willows, cattails, some branches of cottonwood trees, but you were constantly on the move. We moved with the seasons, and so we had to have things like this. This is way more representative of what we had. For those of you that don't know, we were involved in the Bear River Massacre in January 29th of 1863, where we lost about 500 people. A lot of the old historical drawings have all these teepees, but in reality, there were only 4 that were like bit canvas, and the rest of them were like this. So that's how we traveled. You can't move very well with travois and those different things. So you had to live in these sorts of areas, and it was open, and it was near water, and it just allowed you to kind of be on the move. So anywhere you went, you had to make your new place. They just kind of left it. Kono or cradle board, as I talked about, you can see that right there, made out of the willows and different things. The baby's stuffed in, probably with cattails. He's good. And so just kind of moving on. So this is a map by Julian Stewart from the University of Utah, and you can see our areas as we moved with the seasons. So right now, we would be kind of coming through here, just finished up pine nutting, and we'd be coming up into the Snake River Valley. In the spring from our winter camps, we would go over and fish. And those of you that have been fishing over here know that there is some really good blue ribbon fisheries over there, and then seeds. That's how we survived. Just a teepee. Sometimes we were called penguidika, or fish eaters. Trout was a big portion. If you remember the map that I just showed you, fish is really great, high in protein. You can dry it, so you can carry it with you as you're going along and picking seeds, because maybe the area you're going to next doesn't have great fishing. Just kind of see, and so you get down into the seeds area and start gathering your summer seeds. Now back then, it was just Salt Lake Valley and Davis County and all that along the Bear River sheds. Just massive amounts of seeds and plants and different things that you could do, and we would pick them off. We'd pick one, and you'd have to remember, because you'd pick one area one year, and then the next year you'd go another one to allow the other one to grow back. When contact happened, and we started seeing people like, what's that thing? It's a fence. Why do you fence in animals? And started plowing up the ground. All those seeds and different things went away. And it's kind of still how it's going today. So we're losing some of that natural. A lot of the wetlands, was made into farming. As we were traveling along, you would run into Chief Little Soldier. I don't know why they were called Weaver Utes, just people were running out of names, but he was a Northwestern Shoshone. But we would run into them in the Weaver Valley and talk with them, and he and Chief Segwich always camped together. They would share a teepee, they would talk, and that's just how we interacted. People would come down, and you could just do that freely. We're also called hukendika, or seed eaters, like I showed you, and then we'll get up to the rabbits, but gumadika, or rabbit eaters. And you can see, like I said, Howard Stansbury, you know, they came through the Ogden's Hole, walked out in a lot of these areas, and these are all fur trappers that just came along, just like, oh, these guys gather seeds, you know. And so we would get named hukendika, but we're also named panguidika because we're also fish eaters. Now we're getting into rabbit eaters. We got a lot of names. Root diggers was another one that goes along with seeds. And so, yeah, root diggers. So the Western yarrow, it's kind of like a yam. You'd always walk with a stick, a digging stick, and you could, when you found them, you could dig them up. We also picked seagull lily and whatever other seeds that were, you know, bountiful in the area, in the watershed, so we could survive, so we could eat. And you would gather all of these. You were gathering all of these things for winter. Like you would eat games, like game birds and deer and stuff along the way, but you were gathering seeds and fish and different types of berries for the winter time. There's a few Indians that are gathering some seeds. That's actually my father when he was 16. I know we don't look alike. He used to say I look like the milkman. That used to piss my mother off. But he was a good egg. Like I said, choke cherries were in there. And you can just kind of see one of the so you can see our route. We're coming through Weber Utes, like I said. That's why we talked about Chief Little Soldier. But we had to come down here and go up here to go pine nutting. Well, what was so important that we were right here? You know, if you go through I-80, the reason I-80 is there. That's an old Indian trail. That's specifically why it's there. That's why they built it there. So along the way, you know, we could have big game hunting. And in those areas, you'd start carrying this as geese and deer and the deer hides and everything you started to do. Of course, you could see all of these things that they were used for. You know, bone bird flutes and different things like that from these. But those were abundant in the area. When Rios Pacheco and I went out to the site at Dugway, they showed us a pit area where they found 18 different types, well, 18 different ducks that were just in a campfire. And that was around the point, you know, getting into the desert. So the Great Salt Lake, Ditchi Pagani, always been home of the bad water, always been bad. My dad used to tell me, well, they named it Shoshone, Salt Lake Valley. And I said, what does that mean? He goes, many houses. And I said, well, why do they do that? And he says, oh, they used to like to watch Brigham Young come down and go from house to house to house every night. He had 27 of them, so. The other reason we were down around the Salt Lake is because it was a heavily traveled area. That's why I-80's there. You would meet a lot of different tribes. And one thing that we traded was obsidian. And you can see in Malad, where's the other one? You can see in Malad, that's where we had it. Now we've had, these are all the different things, but we lived in the Malad area. We found several flakes and shakings and spear tips and other things that we have given to the University of Utah. Said, hey, find out where these came from. 95% of them came from Malad. And so we knew, oh, this was our stuff. This is where we got it. And we had to use that along the way, but that's something we traded. So you can see, boop. And so as we're going up and we're getting ready to go pine nutting, this is where we run into what's now the Spiral Jetty. My grandmother used to tell me that her grandfather told them that they would camp right out here, right on the banks of the Great Salt Lake. His dad, Chief Segwitz, was in charge of the rabbit hunt there. The cottontails and jackrabbits. The cottontail is called Dawitsi or Dawidika. So now we're also rabbit eaters. You know, people keep running, oh, whatever group just gave us a new name, and not realizing we are the exact same tribe. You know, to them, there were 4 different types of people. Jaeger, his name was Dawitsi. That's also my great-grandfather. He survived the massacre. And you can see we just probably left pine nutting out in the western area. This is my Uncle Wally and Aunt Hazel. Now, if somebody were to give me 2 hours, I could tell you stories about Wally. If you're ever hiking in Yost and come across a rock that's carved, don't think it's super old. When I was deer hunting with him, I said, "What are you doing?" Because he was carving in this rock. He goes, "Some white person's going to think this is 10,000 years old." True story, by the way. He used to do that all the time. And so these are the pine nuts, you know. When picking pine nuts, you just pick from the middle. You leave the top and the bottom for the animals, birds and animals on the ground. Also, you can't, like if you saw a squirrel, you can't say that. You'd be like, "Oh, there's my friend with the little nuts." Or if you see the coyote, "Oh, it's my friend with a bushy tail." Because if you said their name, your stuff would go bad. So my grandmother was very strict about that. And you can see that they had poles. She used to like to teach me little things like that. And so we're getting back. And we won't talk too much about salmon, but that's where we'd be headed right now, is to get the salmon to dry. That's what we lived off in the winter. And this was our winter camp, the Wuda Ogwa. This is the spot of our site. We would come here to winter to rejuvenate. It's been called Boa Ogwe. You'll see that. That just means rejuvenation, a spiritual rejuvenation. And this is where our project site is, and we're trying to take it back. You can see the salmon. This is how you would traditionally salmon fish. These are our hot springs. This is the reason we would come in winter there. The hot springs gave our houses heat. The horses could eat. You could sit and bathe. And people just were getting ready. You can see all these types of people. If you know Cade Monker, him and his two little girls. But that leads us to the project site. Why are we doing what we're doing? We only own this much land, like literally. We're trying to recreate everything I just showed you. Everything. We opened up the rivers. We're going to put Bonneville cutthroat trout in there. We're growing willows. We just planted 26,000 plants and trees up there, with 10,000 the year before. We're trying to recreate everything that used to be, so we can teach people. You didn't see this, but this is what this valley used to be like, and here's what we used to do. You can come and get that historical lesson here. And hopefully people will understand, well, why were all those things there? Water and snow. What do we need from the Great Salt Lake? Snow. What do we need out of the Bear River? The largest contributor to the Great Salt Lake, more water. So that's why we're doing it, is to educate people about our history, about how we use the water, and about how it's going forward. So, thank you. If you have any questions.
None?
Wow.
Really? Okay.
First time. I mean, you don't have to answer one.
Well, I think this is a wonderful project. I was at your last planting. It was a wonderful experience. I wanted to know how you found the money to buy this and how much did it cost?
So it was fairly expensive. For several years, we have tribally owned businesses, and for several years we just saved and saved and saved and saved. The landowner one day just called us and says, "I'm ready to sell." We could only buy the north side of the river because of the price. It's in the millions. There's a landowner there. The Boson Live and Landstock went in with us and bought the other half. When we told the Johnson family, "Oh yeah, the Bosons bought the other half," he said, "I never would have sold it to you if I'd have known they were going in on it." It was like Hatfield and McCoy's, but we didn't care. So, but that's how we got it. We used our own funding.
Can you talk a little bit about how you've been removing invasive species and water, how you hope to improve water quality and water going to the Great Salt Lake with what you're doing?
Yeah, so we estimate that there are about between 300,000 and 400,000 different Russian olive trees. Russian olive trees are a water suck. They secrete chemicals. They kill everything around it. When we would used to tell people, yeah, it's in the hundreds of thousands. Oh, you couldn't really see it. Down where we're now into the peninsula, and the Utah Conservation Corps from Utah State is removing the Russian olives. They can attest at how dense that is. But we're removing them by hand. The Utah Conservation Corps cuts them down, treats them within 30 minutes, and then stacks them to dry for a year, and then we burn them. A Russian olive tree can take up to 75 gallons of water a day out of the system. And so that's where this water release is coming back. It'll also be cleaner water because we're replacing that with willows, cattails, milkweed, all of those things, and bringing back beaver that are all water quality supportive. The University of Utah and Utah State, we're going to do a study about Russian olive trees and really how much water does come back, and then make a model so other people can go to the area and be like, oh, here's the best place to do that. So, but a lot of our water estimation is to the Great Salt Lake is coming from the removal of the Russian olive trees.
I have a question. What animals are there right now, and what fish are there right now, and what animals and fish do you hope to have eventually?
Yeah, so we've seen, what, Brian, 2 eagles? Utah State has a game camera up so we can see from when we started until the end. We always see deer. We saw a bobcat the other day, which was weird. A blue herrings, pelican, came in and sat around for a little bit. But not a lot. That area used to be full of Bonneville cutthroat trout because of the creeks and the beaver dams. Those fish love to get in there and sink and be cold. The fish there right now are just we have found some native fish in the area, and we were surprised because we didn't think anything could survive that water. Its turbidity is what, Brian? 22,000? 5 turbidity is drinking water. So we're ocean level. So there's catfish and carp and Utah minnow and things like that. And so we're trying to clean the water up for trout. Trout need pristine water. So that's our goal. And we know that's not going to be accomplished in 5 years, but more like 20, 25 years.
Just looking forward, are you hoping to acquire more lands? And if not, looking forward, what are your biggest challenges that you're looking to make the community aware of in recruiting partners moving forward?
No, that's a good question. Yeah, we're trying to buy any land that we can in the corridor. People just don't want to sell right now. The biggest challenge for us has been working with upstream water users because, as I showed you, the beaver dams were plentiful, and then pioneers and stuff came in. Farmers still hate beavers, and they still hate beaver dams. And so trying to convince them to allow us to do some of these things in their corridor has been a challenge, and that's something that we've invited the community out. We've had a couple people that have responded and like, hey, yeah, I'll be part of this. But that's just the more challenging part, is to show people the effect that you can have by changing the water and not being so channelized and invasive around it.
My question was very similar, but just, what do you need? And I guess in terms of the academic community or volunteer community and other partners, what are some things you need?
We love volunteers. I believe we had 700 at the last planting. We had 400 the time before, so anything that can come in. If you have ideas about, because we're planting so many things, we're going to plant nurseries. If the academic community has ideas about how to grow, one is Seagull lily. But it's not super native there, but it's really important to us. But that's what we're looking at. We have people studying water, rocks, and different things like that. And that all comes from the community from the academic community, because it costs so much money to do those studies with professionals. But the students and the professors are just as good because they really challenge themselves to do that. And so always need volunteers to help plant, and probably more opportunities coming forward. So we have about 200,000 trees and plants to go, so we'll need some help.
I had a question. I'm over here.
Oh.
Hi. Thank you for sharing your story of how, just the history. It's fascinating to me, and I'm so glad to know it. I feel like I should know this, but I don't. I'm curious about the salmon portion, where you said you'd normally traditionally be heading for salmon for the winter and so forth. Mm-hmm. Are there still salmon there? Is that population still thriving, not thriving? I'm just curious.
Not now. I mean, now we don't do that.
No, but but in the river itself, are there still salmon in that
yeah,
region?
there are still. Up in the Snake River, yeah, there's still some there. A lot of lawsuits, with tribes on the West Coast and in Idaho and Montana, because those dams that Reclamation built just really killed that population. But they're still there.
Right, and some have been removed, I know, in some places.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there are still some there.
Hi, I'm just really curious about what your vegetation management looks like. So you said you guys have been treating the Russian olives. Do you guys do any kind of herbicide before you plant or use mulch or?
So we do herbicide on, all the non-native grasses and things that are there. You have to come back and treat Russian olive every 6 months to a year for up to like 3 to 5 years with herbicide to make sure they die. We do that in areas, and then we sprayed, and then I think we did that a year or two ago. Had some really good studies about everything being dead, and so that's one of the areas we planted heavily this year to reintroduce the native and the native grasses and things like that. So we don't have to do that sorts of things anymore.
Here, I'm wondering what your longer term vision is for how people will be in this space as you sort of finish the restoration work and the planting. Do you envision some of the lifeways that you were describing coming back, the harvesting of these plants and the hunting?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. That's one of the reasons we're doing it, is so we can teach our children, our next generation, these are the medicine plants, these are what you eat, and we're going to cultivate them in the area and go out and pick them and do those things. And we're actually building, it's a phase project where we're building walking trails so the general public can come out and see, and we'll tell stories through, boards and QR codes where you see choke cherries, and then you can learn about all of that. You can learn about Indian tobacco and what it was used for. And so that's how we're trying to engage the community and keep our culture going, because we have to pass it on. And right now, there's just, there's not a lot of places to go, but if we have our own area, it's like, okay, they'll get to know the plants and we'll be able to reuse them and for medicines and food. Food sovereignty is a big, important thing for our tribe.
That's all the time we have, but give a round of applause for Brad Parry.